The worst horror movie I ever saw was fucking great.
Hello and welcome to This May Hurt a Bit. My name is James Strayer and this is...
John C. Myers.
And we are a horror franchise podcast discussing each film in popular and not so popular franchises. And today we are discussing Damien, the Omen 2 from 1978. But most importantly, we have a guest with us today. She is a costume designer, a fashion historian. Most notably, her work can be seen in Scare Package 2 on Shudder, as well as various episodes of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs. And her articles can be found in print and online in Fangoria. Jolene Marie Richardson. Hello, Jolene. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Jolene and I met almost a year ago at the Overlook Film Festival in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And we were standing in line for The Tingler, I believe, was it?
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
From 1958. And we all sat in seats in that theater with the man, the myth, the legend, Joe Dante, just like an aisle over. And we were all hoping that we were sitting in a seat where we got buzzed and shocked.
Did they actually wire it up to do that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They did about I think it was 20 seats in the whole theater. So we didn't get any because we were right behind everybody from Fango and we wanted everybody else to get them.
Yeah.
So we didn't take those seats.
That's fair.
But it was great because people got shocked in their seats. There was one person who stood up and screamed and fainted and they had paramedics run in and pull them out on stretchers and stuff. It was very 1950s fun.
It was fun.
That's great.
So yeah, folks, go to film festivals. You'll meet cool people and then have them on your podcast a year later. But anyway, tell us a little bit about what you've been up to lately. You are a fashion historian. You work on productions. I would like to hear about what it's like to work on The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs, being a fan of that show. What's a day on set like that?
Oh, gosh. Okay. So I didn't do this last season. I was a little too busy. And then with the strikes and everything, that kind of stopped a lot of stuff. It's a small production, kind of, we call it like a little Scotch tape production. But I got to do some really fun stuff on it. Like things that I never thought that I would ever do, like make a fart monster.
Oh, fantastic.
Whoever thought I would be turning all 6 feet of John Brennan into a fart monster?
Hey, Mom, look, I'm working in the movies.
Living the dream.
Yeah. And that was a lot of fun. I got to collaborate with Ashley Thomas, our incredible makeup artist, who I've done other films with, who we met through The Last Drive-In on with that. So she made the mask out of a grocery store, plastic bag.
Heck yeah.
And yeah, so that's the level of budget we're working with, but it has that charm to it. And I think that's why the fans love it because it's okay that it doesn't have the quality, the budget, that's the whole shtick. But it's a lot of fun. And Austin, the director, he owns that trailer that sits on the set. So he brings it to set when we go to film and then he takes it to a storage unit somewhere and parks it.
Oddly enough, I had a question. That was the question I had. But,
yeah, I think it was one of the last Shastas, that brand and model. So he was like, I'm just going to buy it.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Great little team. Met a lot of friends. That team have then since gone on to work with those friends doing other projects like Cannibal Mukbang, which was written and directed by Amy Kuge, who is our BTS photographer. She's a little bit of art department. She's kind of our catch-all on the Last Drive-In. And and then on that was Matt Weir, who's art director, art department on Last Drive-In. Deanna, who is kind of a catch-all. She was AD. She was, a little bit art department. Ashley and her partner Alex, they do Yellow Moth SFX. Yeah, it's a great little squad.
That's fantastic. And you just shot a short. What was it? Just before the strikes? Last year was a little bit mushy in my brain, but I know you were working on a short last year, right? Yeah,
literally wrapped at 5 a.m., got on a plane and went to Overlook.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that was it. Okay.
I had to get up at 6 to take my cat to a vet appointment, and I am exhausted. I don't know how you get on a plane.
I kind of slept, and then I was there to see my friend Ted Gagan, his film Brooklyn 45, and I was
great
just
movie.
Hoping that I was going to stay awake the
Yeah.
whole movie. I was like, Ted, I'm like, if I miss anything, just tell me what happens. I made it through. But yeah, it's still in the post-production phase. Don't know where that's landed yet. But yeah, that'll hopefully come out soon about a vicious creature.
Yeah.
Awesome.
In time for Overlook?
I don't know if it's going to be in time for Overlook because it's in April and they're still...
Oh, sure.
posting.
Working.
Working.
For sure.
But I don't know. We'll see.
Cool. Well, definitely keep us posted and we'll let everybody know where they can see that once
Absolutely.
it's online or going to festivals. Because, again, you should go to film festivals if you can. They're fun.
Yeah. They're a lot of fun. And Overlook's not that expensive.
No.
And New Orleans is a pretty cheap city to get to.
Yeah,
Nice.
Exactly. So it's a blast. What is your experience with the Omen franchise? Was this a new one for you? I'm sure you've seen the first one. I want to assume. Had you seen the sequel? Any of the sequels? Because that's kind of our shtick here.
No, I hadn't seen any of them. So I went, you sent me the podcast and I was watching and listening, and then it had been on my list. And I think because everybody talks about the kills and I felt like I had seen the movie, but then the second one or the sequels, I knew there were sequels because I went to a thrift store years ago. I bought a book thinking it was just the first Omen and being like, oh, I'm going to start reading this book. And it happened to be the fourth one. And I started it and I was like, I have no idea what's going on. And I put it away on the shelf.
I love
how did the baby become president?
Yeah, right. I love the idea that you got part 4. And I believe, I haven't looked into it too much because I want to be surprised, but I believe that was a straight to cable film too.
Probably.
Like it's not kind of in the original. You got the novelization of the straight to cable part 4.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, well, because I was trying to make it through, because Grady Hendrix has that great Paperbacks from Hell book. So I was like, I love B horror movies. So I'm going to now read all of these really shitty B novels.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to make my way down the list. I was like, oh, this has got to be on it. And I was like, I need to go back and get the first one now.
Sure. Yeah. Well, did you like the first one once you caught up? Okay, great. Yeah.
It was great. And this one is just as bonkers. And they take themselves so seriously, and it's such a serious, heavy film. And there are moments in there where you're like, what?
Yeah.
This one, it seems like it's a trend in a lot of horror franchises for the second one to get a little goofy with it, whether intentional or not. And this one definitely has some laugh out loud moments, frankly.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. But I'm still a sucker for the kind of ponderous religious stuff, and I like that self-serious, we're all Catholic, we're all we have Bible verses at our fingertips to explain everything. I just personally kind of dig that stuff. So when you add in a little bit of slapstick elevator slasher humor, I'm there for it, as the kids say.
Oh yeah. And nobody guilts you like the Catholics. I grew up Italian Catholic, so nobody guilts you like them.
Right. Yeah. This film was directed by Don Taylor. He replaced the original director, Mike Hodges, and I wanted to look him up. And that guy directed Get Carter and Flash Gordon, which right there, that's an amazing resume going into the Omen Part 2.
Yeah, and according to him, he was offered the first one and he turned it down because he's not really interested in horror movies and particularly doesn't like religious movies. But the second one, he was in a position where he needed money. And the second one he also co-wrote the script initially. It had a lot more to do with Damien and the corporation and their rise to power. And then the producer, Harvey Bernhard, who now has a writing credit, undercut him in a lot of ways, rewrote huge swaths of the script. And he claims he walked out on his own accord. The producer's like, no, we canned his ass. So,
and the director that brought in Don Taylor, I was looking up his credits prior, and he did a ton of TV in the 60s and 70s. And so he had a reputation for doing the whole on time and under budget. So when you're working on the fast-paced schedule of a television production, I'm sure he's a go-to to okay, we gotta straighten this out. We gotta straighten out this feature film by bringing in a TV guy.
Yeah, and that really cheesed off Lance Henriksen, who I was surprised to see in this movie. Lance Henriksen, in an interview, referred to him as a clumsy, non-artistic stuntman. Because part of why he joined was to work with Mike Hodges, and he had this whole idea for his character being a Vietnam vet who just saw the worst stuff and was like, just screw this land, I'm going to become a Satanist, to shepherd Damien along, and all that's just not
too bad.
in the
I
final
could have done
film.
with a little bit more Lance Henriksen as mentor. So starting off with that fantastic music, as always, that Goldstein score, the older guy in a Jeep, who it took me a second to realize who that was, but that's the archaeologist exorcist from the previous film, motoring through Middle Eastern country, and he meets up with a guy with a neckerchief. So,
with a neckerchief.
Yes. So, Jolene, can you please kind of explain the wide swath? Is there an ascot, a neckerchief? I think they're kind of cool, actually. I don't know if I would want to pull one off, but necessarily, but I think they're kind of neat.
So neckerchiefs are what everybody's wearing in all of these movies, which are just a bandana that you fold up and you tie around, it's got shorter strings, versus like a cravat ascot jabot, which is all iterations of the necktie from different periods. So first you have the jabot, which is that big ruffle thing. Think of like King Louis IV, all those guys. And then as we move into the 19th century, it's more of an ascot. It's cleaner. It sits like kind of under most formal wear, but then it could sit on top of tuxedos. And that's like the wider pieces of, like the silks and the taffetas with those crazy patterns. They usually have like a dimple pin, like a pearl in the middle. And then that later then moves into the necktie. There's also versions of the cravat, which dandies used to wear, which were just 6 feet long pieces of linen that they would just wrap around their necks like six times and then do this big bow. So those are the differences.
Oh, like Lenny Kravitz's giant scarf.
Yes.
Okay. So what was the other one? Like a jabot?
Jabot. Yeah, it's a French. It's a cravat essentially, but it's just it's ruffled front.
How is that spelled?
Jabot.
Oh my God, Jim! That is the name of the cosmetics company on Young and the Restless.
You're right.
Really?
Jabot Cosmetics.
Victor Newman.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So, as soon as you said that, my eyes just like lit up like
that is a childhood memory.
Sorry, we're big Victor Newman fans here.
But I will say about the neckties is what I noticed in the first film is that that character is wearing them in every scene up until the moment before his death. He's wearing one when he dies, but it's almost like a red herring of like, you keep looking at his neck. And then the scene before he doesn't have it on when he goes to tell him that his wife has died. And then so we're not really like noticing it. And then the next scene, he has a very flesh tone one and then kablam.
Oh, interesting. I wouldn't have picked up on that at all. Okay, cool.
Well, cool. That's all we needed. So thanks so much for joining.
No, so like, but it's fair to say that like, so a neckerchief is just going right on the neck. Everything else is just like below the collar, below like more on the shirt garment then.
Kind of, sort of. So they were all being affixed to the neck, but what makes a neckerchief different is just that it is just like a bandana that's just tied around the neck.
Right. Okay.
It's more of like a decorative piece. It doesn't really do anything for the garment, really.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Just makes you look awesome.
Just makes you look like Ken. Because when James sent me that, I sent him a GIF of Ken from Toy Story 3.
Right, exactly.
So what is, being a historian, is there something about the neckerchief? Like if you're attacked by the devil or worried about being attacked by the devil, why should you seek out someone with a neckerchief? Because that seems to keep happening.
I don't know, but there was a huge resurgence of it in the 70s because we did have a Victorian 19th century revival in clothing with like peasant dresses, peasant shirts. So like this dandyism was coming back. We were redefining what masculinity was at the time, and that was coinciding with fashion. So the neckerchief did come back into fashion because of that.
Love it. This gentleman with said neckerchief, Michael, he is being informed by Carl that Damien is definitely the Antichrist.
There are 4 faces of the Antichrist on his rise to power. The face of Yigale Satan as a child is the same.
The same? What are you talking about?
There is no doubt. Damien Thorne is the Antichrist.
We come to realize this is just picking up a week after the previous film. Carl hands Michael a trunk and basically says, hey, there's a letter in this. You got to get it stateside right away. This explains everything. And I can kind of understand Michael's hesitance to just be like, how do I go at people and just say, no, this is literally the Antichrist. So I sympathize with him here.
Well, they go and they check out the wall because he just kind of doesn't believe him. He's like, trust me, I've seen this wall, Yigale's wall. We found it. It's such a big deal. Looks like Damien. Look right here. Who we find out in the interim is no longer with the president. The last one ends. He's with the president, and they decided to write that out of the way. Give him. He's now living with Robert Thorne's brother, Richard, who we never heard about before, but that's fine. So they go to check out Yigale's wall, and you get this cool little Tomb Raider-y sequence revealing that the painting does indeed look like Damien, and then it collapses on everybody.
Rip to those two guys.
Yeah, it was a horrible way to die. Like all the deaths in this are pretty like protracted.
Oh yeah.
Much more like Final Destination-y.
Yeah.
They're getting buried in sand, and he's like praying about how the devil will be overcome, and the devil's like, yeah, eat sand, buddy.
Yeah. He's got a great voice for that too, when he's delivering stuff.
Leo McKern.
And that picture on the wall is so pristine and so beautiful. I had to laugh at how great. And then it grows. Like it actually matures with Damien as he matures when we see it again at the end of the film.
Oh, good call. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I was like, wait, wasn't he a baby?
Yeah.
And maybe this will come up in the next one, but like no one bothered to take a photo of it at all. It was
That's what
just
I
like,
said.
we just have this wall.
And it was great that you brought that up because I spent like the first 10 minutes of the film being like, wait, I thought he was living with the president. But okay, so that was a detail at the end of the first one. I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, well, at least he was with the president at the funeral and like with the first lady, and they're holding his hand. So it seemed pretty. That was the inference anyway, but I guess they just went, well, no one will remember that.
Yeah. And evidently one of the early scripts had Damien like still being 7 or 8 years old or something, but growing up in the White House with the president.
Right. Which is what they did kind of in Good Omens, where they accidentally switched the kids, but they tried to give the Antichrist to the president in that book.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. We cut to Chicago 7 years later, and I do love Damien's introduction here. He's walking towards us from far off camera with a leaf fire pit right in front of camera. And evidently, this is one of the scenes that the former director took a solid half day to film. I say it's worth it.
Yeah. Well, I just like it because it's just sort of announces right off the bat. Like, were you expecting any subtlety in this movie? Nope. Like, this is the son of the devil. We're just going with that. There's no mystery about it. Here we go.
He is dressed in a military uniform. So the rest of this film takes place largely at a military academy. So you might as well put the son of Satan right into the military, make him learn some discipline. I get it, I suppose.
I guess. He's the son of, like, I don't know. If I was the son of Satan and I found out I was the son of Satan while at a military academy, I'd be pissed.
Right.
Like, why am I at military school?
Right.
That sounds like Protestant work ethic. Like, let me be a lazy bum and just control stuff.
Right. Where does he get his like decadent teenage years as like, you know, kind of like almost like a Hellraiser type of kid, you know? So Damien says goodbye to his Aunt Marion, who I was convinced for the first few seconds that she was the receptionist from Beetlejuice in the afterlife.
She is.
She is?
You know, the caseworker.
Yeah.
Okay, see, like I must have gone down the incorrect IMDb holes because for the rest of her life, I kept saying like, hey, it's totally her, but I was wrong. Okay,
or like for Mars Attacks, yeah. Well, and I had the thought. I had the same thought when I was a kid watching Tales from the Dark Side with William Hickey and being like, I bet he gets typecast as a lot of old people. Where I'm just like, yeah, has she ever not been old? Because I just only know her from that. But no, she's had a long, illustrious career. But she just, and it's also because like she's as old. She looks as old in like 1978 as she does in Mars Attacks.
Yeah.
What,
and
30 years
Beetlejuice
later?
But I'm now fully convinced that Beetlejuice is in the Omen canon because she died. She becomes a caseworker.
There you go. Yes.
Fondness for wearing suits. Like she's,
There you go. Right. I like that. The uncle sees Damien off as well as his cousin, who is holding a trumpet. I guess he just we find out later that he marches in a marching band, but I thought that was a funny introduction of him just carrying a trumpet around.
I was waiting for him like this is your cousin Gabe or something like that. You know, like some tie to being an angel or something.
Totally, yeah. This kid's name is Mark, and he is encouraged to go back to say goodbye to Mary, and Mary tells Mark,
I know you've been so busy running after that cousin of yours. You mustn't let him drag you around the way he does.
He doesn't drag me around. I like him.
Give me a hug. You be careful.
She is very skeptical of Damien from the outset.
We're told a lot in this movie. We're told a lot about Damien being bad rather than seeing it. There's just a lot of like people don't trust him. But
well, look at him. Didn't he give you the creeps? I mean, there is a little bit of that.
I suppose. I mean, no more than any other child. But yeah, like particularly at this beginning, she just gets bad vibes from him. But Damien just seems like a kid.
Yeah.
Other than walking behind fire, he seems right.
I thought he was going to go straight through that fire. I was like, we're coming right out the gate, going right through that.
Yeah.
Also, he still has a British accent. And he only lived in England with American parents for like a couple years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he should be full-blooded American at this point.
Yeah.
Damn it. Especially if he's going into politics.
Yeah. No, I think it's a put on because like that's really annoying.
Yeah.
And that seems like something the devil would do where you're like,
he's going through a phase.
Why are you doing this? Yeah.
We don't tell kids they can't go through the phases now.
Right.
You know, just like just talk with your dumb accent.
All the princes of hell do this. Just like
At dinner that night, Aunt Marion threatens to not leave her shares in the business, equaling $100 million to Richard, the uncle, unless, he does what she says. And that demand is to separate the boys and pull him from the military academy. She wants them completely separate. And Marion ends up screaming at Richard.
I may be old, but I'm not insane. Your brother tried to kill Damien. Get out! Will you tell her to go? I'm going.
I was excited that they just addressed that early on, especially because it's a family piece. Like, you do realize that the father of this child, tried to murder him at the end of the last film. No glossing over.
No, and this is also where we're introduced to, in this sequence, to Lee Grant is Anne Thorne, Damien's adopted mother of sorts. And also his cousin's adopted mother. We eventually learned that she is not biologically related to any of them, but Lee Grant is fantastic in this. Mm-hmm. A lot of good energy and some great outfits. I was particularly knew we were having a fashion person on. I figured I should pay attention to that more than I do. But there were a lot of her clothes that I was like, those are pretty sweet. That one, towards the end, she's wearing this green, I don't know if it's a house dress or something, but I'm like, I just want a Snuggie of that. That would be great just to lounge around the house.
So many pashminas, so many capes. She's got a whole animal on her at one point with the hat and the cup. And I love her face every time somebody refers to her as, well, you're the second wife. She gets this really sour face. Stop reminding me.
Right.
Yeah. And I didn't realize she is in Mulholland Drive.
Is
she's
she?
a bit part. She is the woman that comes to when Naomi Watts is moving into the new apartment, into her aunt's apartment or whatever. She's the one that's at the door. It's something's going on here, and she's wearing a black hood.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Louise Bonner is the character's name apparently, but that's Lee Grant.
Nice. After Marion leaves, Richard agrees with his wife that he'll kick Marion out in the morning, which just seems cruel, but okay. He's the Lord of the Manor here. He's got
$100 million to land on. I think she'll be fine.
Yeah.
They watch a bunch of slides in the next room, typical 1970s vacation slides here. Now, I kind of like creepy archaeological digs, so if somebody invited me over to see that, I'd be kind of into it, but the setup did make me kind of laugh. Maybe this is an antiquated idea at this point in 2023. You don't go over and watch slides, or people don't make you look. It's more look at this thing on my phone, I suppose.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone come over and look at my Instagram page with me. But so, yeah, this is about the dig that the aforementioned dig that was happening. And they encountered all of these artifacts, including, and they've already brought this up already, the statue of the Whore of Babylon. Mm-hmm. It's really a tell right at the beginning, because anytime they mention the Whore of Babylon, they immediately cut to Lee Grant. And she goes sounds nasty. And it's okay, you're always showing Lee Grant right after you say Whore of Babylon.
Take that, Lee Grant. Poor Lee Grant.
Well,
gosh.
I think for what the plot is supposed to be, it's supposed to tie in later, but
which
we'll get there.
I didn't pick up on in the first watch, but yeah.
Well, it's also funny because I like the Whore of Babylon is supposed to mean many different things to some people. It's the Pope in Rome and Catholicism in general. Some people, it is just Rome. It's just all these cities. And in this one, it's no, it's a lady.
Yeah.
It's on the Yale's wall. There's the painting of the Whore of Babylon. Be shopping.
Yeah.
That's how you can tell.
Right. Marion awakes in fright from her bed. She's got a Bible resting on her chest. And there is a rather ominous crow at her feet in the bed. And then she grows in pain and gets out of bed and stumbles towards the crow and ends up falling over as if stricken by a heart attack.
Yeah, a crow looked at her so hard she died.
Hey, it's a crow of Satan.
I guess it's a little less of a powerful enemy than a dog.
Yeah,
that's true.
Because dog has that physical threat, and then already we've gotten rid of any sort of subtlety of, is this actually happening? Is Damien in control of this too? No, a bird looked at a lady and killed her.
Right. Although,
so again, we're just abandoning that, which is fine. Yeah, that's fine. They're going big with it.
Totally. Yeah. This is where you start to do the thing that we talked about in the last episode is this directly at Damien's behest? Is this kind of just evil looking out for him? It's a little uncertain. Cut along to the military academy where Damien and Mark are marching along, and hell yes, Lance Henriksen is their new platoon officer.
Thorne, your family's got strong connections with this place, hasn't it? Well, hasn't it?
My father and grandfather were cadets here, sir.
Good. But understand that doesn't entitle you to privileges. We're all the same here.
I mean, we've waxed on about how much we love Lance Henriksen before. He is just absolutely horror royalty. Last seen in our show, Pumpkinhead.
Pumpkinhead.
But not given a whole lot to do here, but as you mentioned, his role got a little bit cut down with the new director.
Yes.
Which is sad. But he's definitely got the face for a satanic guardian, as the previous nanny did in part 1. That is not a slam on Lance Henriksen whatsoever.
No. He's
as
a very handsome
before,
satanic general.
I love that man. I love that man and his pumpkin head. So back in Chicago, we're on the same street where the truck flips in The Dark Knight. Don't know if you saw that, but that's the main street of the big truck stunt in The Dark Knight, the second Nolan Batman film. Wow. I recognized it because I recognized the building in the background. I had my picture taken there once. I was very excited.
Were you flipped over as well?
By the end of the night, sure. Yeah. And then finds Marion's body, and she looks like she is truly just frozen in fear, just fingers clenched and everything. Richard meets up with his business bros, and they take a walk through a plant. And at this point, I'm just like, what does this have to do with Satan? What does this have to do with religion? It slowly starts to make sense, but I'm a little like, what did y'all think of the almost early 80s feeling corporation, big business type of tie-in with the devil?
It was very unclear at first because I didn't know what the business was, because I was like, there's just all these pools. And I was like, is it aquaponics? Like, what are we doing? And then a lot of it looked like, I don't know if either of y'all been to Epcot and been on Spaceship Earth. Because of the time period, a lot of the characters look like the future communication scene with those blinking light boards and that and the lab coats and everything.
Yeah.
So it was interesting.
We spend a lot of time there, and it's eventually supposed to fold into because this is the Thorn company. This is going to be what Damien is taking charge of, and there's people working behind the scenes to push stuff along. But they spend a lot of time with this, and there's a lot of corporate intrigue that seems parallel to the rest of the story until the end. And particularly, we're introduced to, I believe his name is Paul. It's a new hire there. It's like a new VP of some sort, who's really pushing the idea that, so we're big into electronics and energy. But what if we focused instead on starving people? It took me for a while to figure out what his plan was, because I'm still not 100% clear, because it involves buying big chunks of land in other places to do big agricultural stuff. But he pitches it always as
our profitable future, aside from energy, lies also in famine.
What?
He's being honest.
You're a bad salesman. Abundance, something good. But he's like, no, we're going to starve people, and it's going to be awesome.
Well, I wonder if they use that word too because of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, right? There's famine, there's war. I wonder if that ties in.
I think you're right. I think it's supposed
totally
to.
Because they specifically said famine.
Right. Good call, because it's not that I hear the word famine every day, but when I do, I do think of that kind of biblical idea. It's not just starvation, it's famine.
Right.
That's a really good call. I didn't even think about that, but I think that does make sense. What are the other three horses? Is it?
Well, there's as she said, there's war, and then there's pestilence, and Doc.
Sleeping.
Yeah.
What is the fourth one? I don't. Yeah.
I'll
Someone's yelling at us right now.
Yeah.
And I don't
probably
blame
that fourth horseman.
Right. You forgot me again.
It's like that scene in Seinfeld where they're like Pavarotti and this guy and the other guy.
Yeah. Right.
I think it's death. Yeah. It's just
plain old death.
It's
plain old death.
Oh yeah, death, famine, war, and the conquest of glory.
Nice. Okay. Well, yeah, that makes a lot more sense to me now, but I still feel like, I'm just not that big of a fan of corporate espionage type of movies or that kind of stuff, but I feel like there was a little bit too much of this in here, but at the same time, I can definitely see where they're going for the whole corporations in bed with politics angle, since the Omen is so based on raising the devil up through politics. And so we got to make a detour here over at large corporate stuff.
Sure. And it's attempting that tie to, the evil of corporations and the stuff they're doing. These men just casually talking about famine.
Right.
But I think it's perhaps was bigger in the original version of the script, because it seems lost in the shuffle and a lot of this. Same thing with the war stuff.
Yeah.
So you just end up with these, like I said, these parallel storylines.
Yeah.
back at the academy, another cadet jokes about how Damien's family, and you in this scene, like, you can already tell that Damien is a little bit full of himself, just the way he carries himself. Maybe confident, maybe overconfidence. I can't tell. But he meets with Lance Henriksen, who states,
I'm here to teach you, but also I'm here to help you. Any problems, you come to me. Don't be afraid, day or night. Any advice, you understand me?
And that's when it becomes apparent that Lance is our new kind of nanny character from the previous film. Outside, Teddy the bully is beating up Mark in front of everyone, and Damien comes out, and they have a stare down that is powered by that Jerry Goldsmith score. Just a lot of eyes close up, back and forth with that music swelling. And Damien does end up telepathically flinging Teddy into a door right in front of a room full of cadets, which, if we're going by Exorcist rules, this is some vulgar display of power early on, in front of everybody.
Well, I also wonder how much like Carrie influenced this as well.
Oh, there you go.
I just think because it's happened in so many other movies that we've done so far, where like there's this telekinetic aspect that really wants to pull from Carrie. That was just happening, and so for like, what if we put some peanut butter in the chocolate and have these two taste great together? But yeah, he mentally beats up this kid, and then Lance Henriksen is like, does not care, basically.
Yeah. He's like, "What are you polishing the floor?" He like walks away.
Right. And that's it. Yeah. I do like thinking about Damien as Carrie, though, especially from the time, because Carrie would have been 76. Yeah, so they would have had a little bit of time to kind of be
same year as the Omen. So
yeah.
Mark is shocked and knows that Damien did something to him, but he doesn't know what exactly happened. As Richard is leaving his apartment one morning, a woman in an absolutely killer red coat comes running up to him, and this is Ms. Joan Hart. She was reporting on Carl the archaeologist, and evidently he was also an exorcist. Evidently they found Carl's skeleton from the dig, but most important of all, she worked with David Warner. So, she's all right in our book.
That's right.
Richard immediately has her tossed out of the car. So Joan Hart was referred to in earlier scenes, and now we get to see her in all her glory.
Well, apparently that actress, Elizabeth Shepard, had worked with Mike Hodges about this character, particularly that dress. And they drew it he was a big Edvard Munch fan. And so that was a reoccurring theme in a lot of his pictures or paintings. There was a figure in a red dress, woman in a red dress kind of in the distance. And so he wanted that striking view, particularly because how muted all the other things that she just like pops right up. And some of it's also, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, but she's a cartoon.
Oh,
like she's a ridiculous, huge person. And I love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
But so it's like having this very primary colored person just show up in this sea of beiges.
Oh yeah, especially when she walks into the football field and it's just her. That's all you see is her. And then she stands next to the man in the black suit, and it's just her.
Yeah,
yeah. and I guess the Harvey Bernhard hated that dress. Just hated that dress.
Really?
But but she's like, no, I love it. It's great.
He must have not been on board for that whole the pop of color in the sea of beige.
Yeah. And it could also just be like, well, I screw that guy and any ideas that he had. So she had just shown up, and we haven't mentioned at all that Richard Thorne is played by William Holden. Okay. He's a great, classic leading man actor. So just Damien just plugging through these guys.
Yeah.
All of Audrey Hepburn's men. He's just eliminating all these men who worked with Audrey Hepburn.
To get to Audrey Hepburn. I get it now. I get it.
Roman Holiday. Gregory Peck was in Roman Holiday. William Holden was in Sabrina. Yeah.
There you go. So he's just like, Audrey Hepburn will be mine.
See, John Hinckley, that's how you impress an actress.
Or, Devil's got good taste, I guess. Yeah. Who doesn't love Audrey Hepburn?
But I guess Holden was approached to be in the first one. He's like, nah, I don't do that Satan crap. But the first one made a lot of money, and so he was like, I will absolutely do that Satan crap.
Yeah. Is there a paycheck in this? Sure.
Yeah.
So funny.
At the museum, Joan Hart runs into Anne and wants to know about Damien. Someone comes screaming up that Richard is furious and she needs to leave, and I do love how she just screams,
I've seen your Gale's wall.
I don't care what you've seen.
You must care. Damien.
What about Damien?
I'm not sure yet.
I'm not sure why I'm so afraid of him yet. That was weirdly like realistic to me.
It was very odd because so Anne is there talking to the guy in charge of the museum, or it's going to be in charge of the Thorn Museum. He's all excited to tell her about Yagail's wall. And I just liked where she's like, who is Yagail? He's like, a fascinating guy. No idea.
Yeah.
Got a big kick out of that. And her hat looked like a bonbon. So the whole time I just looking at her great hat. Yeah. So Joan breaks in and is like, well, I'm going to talk to you now about Damien.
Yes.
Like, your husband kicked me out, but I'm going to try to ingratiate myself with you. And while that guy leaves to go, deal with this or whatever, I like she's talking and then she's like,
your husband is a little unfair on the press. They were very kind to his brother.
Were they? I never knew his brother.
That's right. You're Richard Thorne's second wife.
Mm-hmm. It was really crappy. We're like, oh, you're just the side piece.
Yes.
It was really mean.
Right.
Yeah. And then when the guy comes back and he's like, well, I've heard what's been going on and you need to get out of here. She's like, no, your lives are in danger. You're got to be afraid of Damien. Why? I don't know if the idea is that Anne is supposed to like zap her with some eye beams, because it cuts to Anne and Anne's kind of looking at her, but then she's immediately like, oh, gotta go.
Right.
And leave. But they don't underline it enough to make you even question really whether that happened. I had to go back and rewatch it a couple of times.
Oh, as if Anne like shut that down.
Yeah. If Anne somehow like vibed her out,
right.
or if she was just like, I've forgotten.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I got really ahead of myself.
Or again, kind of like what you're saying, everybody says Damien's bad, but we don't know why he's bad yet. So she's just like, I think this is terrible. Why? I haven't seen him do anything.
Yeah. Well, they already think I'm kind of goofy if I say I saw a picture of him that he looked like a picture of a devil that looked like him. Are they going to really buy it? But it convinced her. So probably.
Sure. She then she goes to the football field, as you were mentioning before, and locks eyes with Damien, who takes off his helmet, and they just sort of like gaze at each other with that gold scene score.
And that's great because it's like, so she can't get information about Damien from Richard. So she tries the wife. That doesn't work. So she tries, okay, fine. I'm just gonna go right to the source, finds out where Damien is somehow. And then I think it's supposed to be the like, oh my God, look at his face. That's the guy from Yagail's wall. But it just looks like she has seen the hottest teen she has ever seen. Like you could either put Dreamweaver underneath it or a bunch of Tex Avery sound effects. And the effect is pretty much the same.
Both?
Yeah. She's just like going. Yeah. But the Goldsmith theme kind of undercuts that, unless it's a little bit evil.
Yes. She flees, but her car stalls out on a country road, and that ominous crow is back and on top of her car and totally ends up pecking her eyes out. Very Birds Hitchcock style. Yeah.
Well, in fact, Robert Barrick was the bird wrangler on this movie, the same guy who did The Birds. This is again Elizabeth Shepard.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were three different birds. There was Windy, the bird who was trained to fly onto a branch. He was the long distance bird, according to her. And then there was Tuffy, who was trained to land on black hair and peck at her eyes repeatedly. And Meat Boy, who was trained to land on black hair and peck out eyes only once.
Aww.
Yeah.
Wait, what are the three names again?
Windy, Tuffy, and Meat Boy.
I love that. God.
Yeah, those sound like Mad Max villains.
Yeah.
But that is from an interview with Lee Gambin that she gave. And she talked about that, and that it was a little harrowing, but it was fine. So these things are attacking her, and this scene is ridiculous.
This is the best kill of the entire movie.
It's so funny because she's getting attacked by these birds. It's all very kind of comical and huge because some of it's also just get back in the car.
Right.
Just get in the car. But you're freaking out. You're being attacked by birds, and finally, like she stumbles and falls into a ditch. Again, still wearing that same amazing red dress. Oh, yeah. Birds fly away. She kind of wakes up, kind of comes to, and then gets hit by a truck. Kind of. Like, I'm not clear what happens because the truck approaches her. And so you're like, okay, it's like any other scene where you've seen this happen. Gage Creed, the guy from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's going to hit him. It apparently has like a cow catcher on the front or something because it just flings her up and it hits the top of the back of the trailer of the semi.
It's so good.
I rewound that a bunch.
Yeah.
It was just beautiful. And again, like that makes no sense, but they went for it and hell yes.
They really did. And just like the beats of all of it of her leaving
Yes.
the car, of her swatting it, because first it takes her hair down, and then it throws her into the ditch, so she's rolling around in the ditch.
Right.
She's got like giallo blood eyes.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And then you see the wig come off of the mannequin as soon as it hits the back of that truck, and then it runs over the head when it goes under the wheel.
Yes.
And then it kind of re-inflates. It like deflates and re-inflates with the wheel.
Yes.
It was insane.
It's so good.
But that coat held up. So buy that coat.
The coat, yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Costume department's like, we need to take that back to the store that we got.
Right. We can return this and make our budget back.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's just been lightly run over.
Yeah.
That got some hooting and a hollering for me as I was sitting on the couch watching that.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Sometime later, the snow is falling and there's a nice family snowball fight with Richard, Damien, and Mark. And it's kind of like one of those like, see, they're all normal type of scenes. Cut to at Mark's birthday party. Bill tells Paul that his land plan is unethical and he is still trying to figure out how all this fits in. And again, I do like Paul's jacket in this scene. It's like this big kind of fluffy guy with this like white trim. It's fantastic. Paul invites Damien to the plant, and I do like in this again like how they styled Damien, and I might have mentioned this even if we didn't have Jolene on, because I just like the idea of not like styling the Satan boy in like all black necessarily. He's got this great white sweater on, and I thought that was a great choice.
Well, I love knit symbolism in horror. I talk about this all the time, especially when they put it on villains, because wool is made from sheep. So you literally have a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Oh!
On film.
Oh, there you go.
Nice.
I love that. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. What are some other like villains throughout horror history that might have that? Like
so we see it on Pamela Voorhees in first Friday the 13th. We see it on Chris Evans actually in Knives Out, not horror, but that uses like the cable knit, because it's soft and it's cozy. So it's very knits can be very disarming when you use them the right way. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Nice.
Yeah. Now I'm just thinking about Chris Evans' sweater, and I'm like, that's a comfortable sweater. Yeah.
I mean, and didn't that get a lot of popularity online after that? Like everybody freaking like loved that sweater, you know, more than the movie. Yeah. So Paul is trying to talk with Damien here and just saying,
suspicions of destiny. We all have them. Your uncle has, I'm sure. And Bill Atherton. And myself. A deep, wordless knowledge that our time has come.
It's just two men knowing that they're going to be awesome for no real reason at all. Like, it's just like, okay.
I don't know, it was a little bit, some of it was a little like, do you like movies about gladiators? But you start to get the sense that, so this guy, not only is Lance Henriksen trying to help this guy out, but he's got a guy there as well, which makes you wonder, like, do they know each other? Are they working together? Why do you need this if you have a crow that can kill someone by looking at it?
Yeah.
Like some of the more supernatural stuff sort of undercut some of like the machinations of people at work, which I really like. I like that element of like that there are acolytes everywhere kind of doing some stuff.
Right.
But it does seem like, oh yeah, we need to tie in that corporate piece to this whole thing. So we'll just have him kind of talk to the guy. And because I think also some of it, a thing that was cut out of Mike Hodges' version was there's going to be a lot more of Damien struggling with who he is.
Yeah, we'll get to that one, but that was a big thing for me. Yeah. All the party guests are playing hockey on a pond, and that ominous crow is back, and he starts cawing. There's a great bit of score here where it just sounds like a deep crow caw, just like it's an
almost
instrument.
like a ribbit, like a synth ribbit,
right.
Techno frog.
Damien and Bill go for a loose puck, but I love this bit there. You can see Paul just holds Damien back and won't let him go for the loose puck, and unfortunately, Bill goes through the ice, and there is some really, I just think that the shots of him underneath the ice flowing are like pretty rightly disturbing. Like that's really effective to me. I don't have a particular phobia of being under ice necessarily, but don't want to do it. But just the idea of like being stuck is.
Well, that's like the top millennial fears, right? Like getting caught under ice, quicksand, and like obliteration in like a city.
Right. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. So poor Bill, stuck underneath the ice, can't get out, banging on it.
Yeah, and he's like, the current is carrying him. So he's almost like on an escalator or just a conveyor belt under the ice, which I thought was just terrible because they just keep trying to catch up to him until someone finally gets the bright idea to move a little ahead. But just terrifying. And I guess it was pretty dangerous to shoot on that because you're shooting on a lake of ice. And you're like, okay, let's hope this all works out. And we don't, with our heavy cameras and stuff like that, we don't just crash through ourselves.
And with a bunch of kids.
Yeah, and they kept like yelling for an axe, and all I could think of was like somebody's going to put the axe into the ice, and it's going to just obliterate him.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Or take out like everybody who's surrounding. You know? Gosh.
But fortunately, that doesn't happen, and he just dies.
He just dies, not everybody else.
Yeah, he just gets swept away by the current.
Next, Richard promotes Paul. Like right there as the new president. And it just says, Richard and Ann and I are just out. We're going on vacation. Yeah. Screw you guys. We've had enough of this.
Yeah. I mean, a good friend of yours just died in the ice. You're like, we need to take some time away from ice.
I need me time.
Yeah.
Time has passed in the next scene, and Paul's already on the cover of Fortune magazine. He's immediately been looking for land costs about his famine project, and Richard, who is freshly back from vacation, is not having this. He's pretty pissed about it. Cut to Damien is in history class, and he gets called out by the teacher and asks him questions about Napoleon's army, which Damien answers perfectly, and he then is quizzed rapid fire on all the different major historical death throughout history, which was a pretty cute scene, I thought. And I think that's like actually based on a biblical sequence where there's like a son of Satan who's being like quizzed over like historical aspects of Jesus or something like that. I need to look more into that.
Yeah, see, a lot of my Bible knowledge is, not there, but also like I get confused between like what's actually in the Bible and what's like Paradise Lost, which is basically, just Bible fan fiction.
Oh, sure.
So yeah, it's like, wait, is that true? Well, true. Yeah. Is that what they said? Because particularly because it's not too long after this. Well, it's the result of this where Lance Henriksen is like, hey, pulls him aside and is like, stop it. Yeah. You gotta lay low because you don't want to draw too much attention to yourself. So people know that you're not as powerful as you think you are. Read the book of Revelations. That's going to tell you who you are. That is like the most opaque, like, how do you read that book and go like, aha, I get it now. I guess if you're the son of the devil, maybe it's just, like, oh, I actually know what this means.
Right.
Something just speaks to me. But it's also like, if you could have just not have him be the son of a most powerful guy that would get a lot of attention. You could just have him be like a waffle waitress or something, and then out of nowhere.
Yeah, I clawed up from the back of a Waffle House instead of clawing back up from. I mean, it's like born into but the whole idea of like being born into luxury and having all this power at your fingertips is that's demonic as well. Right.
Whereas waffle waitresses are brave.
Yes,
brave Christians.
Exactly. So Damien does think to figure out to check out his scalp and look for that 666 birthmark. And he does manage to see it with a couple of mirrors in the dorm room bathroom.
Yeah, I don't understand how he was like, well, that's probably what this is. I've been feeling these bumps on my head. It just kind of leaps to him all of a sudden doing that. Mm-hmm. And he freaks out and goes running and then runs out onto this pier. Lovely shot. Mm-hmm. He's like, why me? Why?
Runs out the door, down the field, out onto a dock.
Then immediately is okay with it.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's okay. Yeah. That's where I was just like, I was waiting for a little bit more self-doubt throughout the entire film because that would have been interesting. Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm the Antichrist. Like, I want to see a little bit of wrestling with that. And based on the first Omen, it being a little classy, I thought that there might be some room for that. But they just skip right over that.
No, we need to focus more on a band playing inside. We need a marching band going down the stairs for a very long time.
Yes.
In the door building, that has to be so noisy. That's all marble.
Echoing. Yes.
There's so much echoing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would be so annoyed, but I would also not be at military school. So.
There you go.
They're probably like, this is my jam. Hell yeah.
Right. Basari, a scientist that we see earlier in the film, he returns from somewhere and then calls Paul and tells him he should go to his place. And eventually we find out through long conversation that there were 3 killings on the land that they were interested in purchasing for Project Famine. I don't know what it's called. I'm just calling it Project Famine. We got to get to the bottom of this, evidently.
Yeah, that was a running thing for a while, was Pissarion and where he is and what's going on with the P-84. And this kid's the devil. I don't care about Pisarion. I mean, it's Alan Arbus, that's great, but yeah, I don't know. There was just a lot of time spent on this. I do like though that I feel, and maybe I'm just wrong on this. Did those guys have perms, or was that just how their hair was? Because I don't feel like you see, other than like Justin Timberlake for a little while, I feel like you don't see that kind of do anymore.
Yeah, that's a very 70s.
Yeah, I think it was a perm. Perms were really big back then.
Yeah. So they didn't wake up like that most mornings.
No, I did have a friend in high school though. He was white, but he had an afro. But like, other than that, like unless it's like very genetic, I think it's a perm.
Yeah. So you're saying they went out of their way to look like that.
Yeah. That was a conscious choice.
Yeah.
I salute it.
Yeah. Damien and Mark take a bunch of the cadets on a tour of the Thorn plant while Paul is giving a presentation on the future of the business, again, being famine. He's just laying it out on Front Street again.
and everyone in the board is like, I don't know about this. He's like, no, trust me, guys. Again, you just sell it slightly different.
Yeah,
but I guess if you have the power of Satan behind you, you don't have to.
Yeah. And he does say they're there to help the indigenous cultures. He does say that at the end of the scene. So just trust me.
Yeah, but the way it's there, like they must never know that, or it's like they can't think that we're there for exploitation. We're there to help, which is like just so don't tell them the truth.
Right.
Make them think that we're there to actually help them.
Yeah.
Which again, like nice dig at the vile nature of big corporations and that kind of thing.
Sure.
I just wish there was a little bit more there. And I couldn't help but think of The Simpsons where they tour the cardboard box factory. What is happening to this factory that's actually that interesting? But these kids seem to be super stoked about it.
They're so excited to get out of that van and run into that factory.
That's it.
Like, oh, guy just has his Creedence tape stuck in there. I'm tired of listening to it. But there's a scene where they're coming out of. It's very strange, and I feel like this is again like a leftover for a bit that happens later that we'll talk about. But when they're leaving the elevator in one scene, this one kid's like,
"Isn't there a pesticide that works on sex?" That's right. Sex attractants. Pheromones are extracted from one sex, put into traps to attract other insects of the opposite sex and kill them.
And then it just moves on to something else. And I think that's supposed to speak larger into that like Whore of Babylon thing. There was also going to be a through line where Damien had like a girlfriend and had to choose between destiny and love, basically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so I think that was supposed to play on some of the Whore of Babylon stuff as well, but it really just is there. That's it.
No, it just sounded like teenage boys being like, sex pesticides.
Yeah. Can I get this guy to say sex?
Yeah.
Let's see if I can do it.
I mean, did make me laugh because I'd never heard the phrase sex pesticide before. So.
I've never heard the word sex before, so I got a big kick out of it.
Right. As you would expect, things start going haywire. There's nothing specific going on in the buildup, but you just know like something bad is going to happen in this moment if Damien and a bunch of kids are in a chemical factory, which of course it does. This P-84 whatever starts popping off, filling the room with toxic smoke. And everybody's running around in chaos. It ends up taking down one poor worker, and then it claims the life and face of Basari, who falls to his death. So rip that guy.
When they did this kill, though, and like a couple of the other ones towards the end, I was like, because I was waiting for the crow, because the crow was like, oh, crow death. And I was like, how are they going to do this inside? But they just don't even acknowledge that the crow is there.
Crow's not
like
there.
a guy with a clipboard and a hard hat looks up. It's the crow. It's just a small little like perched on a banister.
Yeah, but instead, in lieu of that, Paul just locks eyes with Damien.
Yeah.
Inside, and that's it.
Yeah, because nothing like all the kids are coughing and wheezing, not Damien.
Nope.
And as we find out over the next couple of scenes, a bunch of the boys were affected, all of them except for Damien, who's very fine. They try to run some tests on him. He refuses, and he leans back in his pillow with a very self-satisfied look on his face. Like, yep, toxic smoke ain't got nothing on me. I'm fine.
Nope. Yeah. Because the doctor, played by Meshach Taylor, a lot of people might know as Hollywood Montrose from Mannequin. A lot less stylish in this.
Right.
Also from Designing Women, if anyone my age is listening. But yeah, he's the doctor. He wants to do tests, and Thorne is like, yeah, can't we just take him home? I know, we'll come back next week and do it. He'll have the same blood then. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And so the doctor's like, fine, whatever.
Yeah, but then, you know, I do always love a shot of a scientist in a late night lab where the camera pans around.
Yeah.
And
someone was working in the lab late one night.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. You know that something bad is going to happen. The only thing lacking in this scene was him eating a sandwich, but, you know, I will overlook that for the moment. He finds out that Damien has jackal in his blood. And I will admit, I did not see this coming because in the first film, I kind of took it as this like metaphor almost, like not specifically jackal. They went for the science of this, and he has jackal in his blood, which was pretty impressive. And then I noticed that I was typing jackal with a Y, and like the old metal band. And I was like,
I'm a lumberjack, baby.
Yeah, I had to double check how you spelled jackal, and it is with an A.
It's with an A, right? But I like that they did bother to have him be like, well, he's got jackal stuff in his blood, but it's not like he has jackal powers. He doesn't become like Puma Man or anything.
Right, exactly.
So Dr. Kane is like, I gotta tell someone about this. This is crazy. Gets in a giant elevator. This very ominous looking, like just the building is like with the red paint or whatever, and this big steel elevator in the middle. It's like, well,
it's great.
This is not going to go well.
No, I was like, you should have took the stairs.
Just take the stairs.
Just take the stairs.
There's 3 floors in this building.
Yeah.
Take the stairs.
You're going down. You're going with gravity. It's fine.
It's going to be okay, buddy. He does take the elevator, and I was like, no joke, not just because about what's about to happen. I was thinking to myself, like, kind of looking at my watch, it's like, we're about due for a good, like, sheet plate of glass gore shot. Like, you know, like something that kind of takes
glass
it.
O'clock.
Yeah,
Let's go.
Something that takes it up just a little bit of a notch. I like all the kills in this movie. Maybe it was just like the previous ones. It was just like guys falling off of rails with gas in their face. But I was like, the Omen should have one real good one. And boy, does it. Because the elevator starts falling, and I thought, that's just not quite enough. And they must have heard me, because a steel elevator cord comes rip-roaring right back down the shaft and full-on bisects the poor guy in half, going right through. And for 1978, man, I was impressed that they went there, you know.
Yeah, and they I mean, this was their big one because they spend a lot of time with it. And it's paced very similar to the way that like a Final Destination one is paced, because the elevator starts plummeting.
Yeah.
He's like, oh my God, but then he survives, and then the cable snaps and the things come down. And then he's showered with glass in slow motion. And,
that's like a crest of a wave, like coming over him with all this glass.
Right. But
oh gosh,
I was impressed. I didn't think they had it in them in 1978 to cut a poor man in half, but they did.
I mean, not for this kind of movie.
That's true.
But it's also that. So the next day, there's a headline that he was killed in a freak accident. And I think the idea is supposed to be happening now that Richard Thorne is starting to be like, boy, there's a lot of deaths happening. Like, she had already, Joan Hart had already told him that all these freak accidents have been happening with people. And he's like, get out of here. But now he's starting to maybe piece it together. But again, this is, I think, a piece that kind of gets overlooked, because later when he's just like, no, it's totally Damien, it seems a little bit more out of left field.
Yeah, I was a little bit bummed because I loved the gag. Well, it's not a gag, but I took it as that in the first film, where there is a photo of the priest staked to the ground on the in the newspaper. Yeah. So in this one, it was just headline instead of like a shot of him bisected in the elevator.
Yeah, they used a classy photo of the guy and not like his torso just in half.
Right. He made it halfway to his destination. Couldn't get there.
Cut short.
Right. Evidently, again, Damien doesn't need to be present for these kind of things. Was this by Damien? Was it another satanic force? It's just that kind of like in between, I suppose.
Yeah.
I guess much like the cave in the beginning, he wasn't present for that. Charles shows up at the museum, where I guess they keep priceless artifacts right next to a boiler room. Comes into play later, obviously, but my goodness, budget cuts.
Boilers were a lot bigger in the 70s. They took up floors of buildings, and so there was a little bit that still peaked up.
Yes. Anyway, he opens and unwraps the ceremonial daggers from the first movie, and inside is a newspaper and some journals and a letter, and we presume this is Carl's chest from the beginning, and somehow made it to him before he died.
Yeah, and this convinces him that this Bugenhagen stuff, the stuff that Joan Hart was saying was correct. He goes to try to talk to Richard about it. Do you know what movie they're watching?
I do not.
In that scene?
Do you, Jolene? Do you
I have
know?
no idea.
I have no idea what that was. It's got a happy
Something
ending,
charming
though.
about a horse.
Yeah, didn't know if it was like My Friend Flicka or something. I have no idea. But it was very it was cute. I don't know. I wanted to watch it. And this I thought this was kind of interesting because you have Anne Thorne and Damien cuddling, hanging out on the couch, like she's hugging him and stuff. And meanwhile, Mark is up in the projection booth.
Yeah.
Which I also just enjoy that they're watching a home movie that is film. You don't really think about that. Like, oh no, it's streaming.
Hey, physical media forever, right? They're so hardcore that they've got reel to reel in their house.
Warren is the guy at the museum, shows up and is talking to Richard about how
5 unexplained horrible accidents, according to Bugenhagen.
Who was obviously insane.
I know how it sounds.
And you believe it.
Read his letter yourself.
I will not read the ravings of a senile old man.
Richard, I knew Bugenhagen. He wasn't senile. If what he says is true, we are all in great danger.
Mark overhears it and is like, oh yeah, no, he's probably right because Damien is weird. I saw him kick a dude.
Right. And that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Mark overhears the whole thing. He goes straight to bed in his powder blue jammies, much like I do every night, and he reads Revelations, which is just kind of adorable, that juxtaposition of the two of them. Damien trudges around in the snow while Richard shares the letter with Anne. Damien's looking for Mark for some reason. I didn't really pick up on why he's chasing after him. And Mark finally puts it all together and just says,
I've seen what you can do. Your father tried to kill you. They say it was crazy, but it was because he knew. I love you, Mark. You're like my brother. No! You are my brother. And you mean more to me than... The beast has no brother!
Mark knows that he's born of a jackal. So one person does know somehow.
Oh, I guess that's true, yeah.
Yeah. Not sure exactly how, but whatever. They get into an argument here, and Damien kills him by giving him an aneurysm, I suppose. For a half second, of course, you kind of know what's coming. I was hoping for a scanner moment, but I guess that would be a little bit too much for this movie.
It's a little I can understand maybe wanting to, because he's growing into his powers. Maybe he doesn't want to be full fledged, but for his how ornate some of these other kills are with all these different machinations, whatever. This one's just sort of that's it.
Well, he loves Mark.
Yeah,
and
I guess that's true.
Because you do see him grapple with it because he's like, I don't want to kill you. You're like my brother.
Yeah,
but then. And I like that the whole exchange is happening while Mark is hugging a tree. He's running away and decides to hug the tree and tell him all this information.
Right.
And then he lets go and then he gives him the aneurysm.
Yeah.
Nature kept him safe.
Right. Yeah. And I did buy his performance in this moment. I did buy this relationship between them. And I suppose, instead of a grand guignol death scene, he lets him off with a simple poke in the brain.
Yeah.
Still seems pretty painful though.
Yes.
He goes down screaming.
Yeah, I don't want it.
Yeah. No, I don't recommend an aneurysm. If you're out there and you want to get an aneurysm, don't do it.
Don't do it.
That's the firm stance of this podcast.
Right.
Also, how big is their property? Because as Mark is walking away from the house, you see guest house, guest house, guest house.
Oh, goodness.
And then he goes into the woods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they are $1 million donors to.
I mean, I hate to credit, that was clearly servants' quarters. So only a couple of guest houses.
There you go.
Just to fact check.
Yeah.
No, I have no idea. But a crap ton of land and a crap ton of property.
At Mark's funeral, there's a whole lot of glancing going on between Lance and Paul and Damien. Just three eyes just darting back and forth.
More like Glance Henriksen.
Glance Henriksen, yeah. Richard leaves New York the next day on business. He is needed by someone. And do we know who he is needed by in this moment? Because unless I just missed it.
Yeah, I think Warren, from the museum said, no, we need to go because the wall's coming to JFK airport before it comes to this museum.
Got it.
So I want you to meet me there. And he's like, no, I don't want to go to New York. He said that a few scenes back. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Which is funny because Joan earlier when she's confronting them in the museum, is like, I've seen Ygael's wall. And Warren's like, who cares? You're all about Ygael's wall. But now that he's convinced, he's back to being all about Ygael's wall.
Right. He lands and goes straight to a church where a reverend takes him to see Charles, who is completely terrified and yelling about how he's seen the wall and he's seen Damien's face on the wall. So instead of waiting for Richard to get there and they go at the same time, he had to take a peek early on, and it kind of drove him half mad by seeing Damien's face.
I want a whole movie about that Reverend Weston, because that guy's voice is such a hug.
Reverend Weston?
Yes, may I help you?
I'm Richard Thorne.
Oh, Mr. Thorne, I'm so glad you could come. Come this way, please.
I want to thank you for calling me. Can you tell me what's wrong with him?
He refuses to speak to me. All I can tell you is that he's absolutely terrified.
Oh, I like you. No one's going to get decapitated.
I also want to know where they shot this scene, because I read that they only shot in Chicago and Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. But when the taxi pulls up, that really looks like Cabrini Green from the first Candyman, that area.
Oh, interesting.
So I wonder if those are the same buildings. It looks like the same area.
Right.
Yeah. Like Chicago being New York. Yeah.
Exactly. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I know people have talked about, and I did not see it, but apparently in the train scene, like when they're at a shipyard or the train yard, that you can see the Sears Tower in the distance.
Oh, fine.
I did not look for it. But.
Yeah. Charles and Richard go to the loading dock to investigate, where everything is being brought inside of a boxcar. The train car starts moving along, and of course he finds the wall with Damien's face on the inside.
Who's now a teenager on the wall.
Teenager, and I didn't pick that up, but that makes total sense, and I actually really dig that idea. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
The tracks suddenly switch, and a car picks up Charles and impales him on the car that Richard is inside. And I had to rewind this a couple of times. I mean, I knew what they were going for, but it was a little bit kind of wonky to see how it was all like kind of cut together.
Well, but who was the geography of where everyone was?
That was what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I couldn't tell, like, is someone in the caboose, like, is the train connected to anything when the engine starts? Mm-hmm. I couldn't figure that out, but yeah. So he's fine. He falls down and the wall falls on him and cracks and is turned to dust, but he's okay. But yeah, Warren is crushed.
Yeah.
I guess gushed.
Gushed.
Did we figure out because it's two things coming together.
Yeah.
Coming together that way.
Yeah. We had this discussion during Saw, whether it's like smushed versus gushed. I think it was like two things coming together is smush. Mm-hmm. I don't remember. Yeah. I'd have to go back and listen.
Gushed
I'm not about
is one thing going down on.
I think gushed is one thing going down. I think smushed is two things. So he got smushed.
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's important distinctions.
Yeah.
A ceremony is held, and Damien is given a saber for exemplary service or some shit, because we've never seen him do any sort of exemplary service for this military academy. But
he is the youngest person in that lineup, too.
Yes.
Because all those other kids are like men.
Right. Yeah. Maybe that's it. And he just gets a cool devil sword from here on out.
Lay low. But here's an award for being the best little man.
Yeah. This did crack me up, because we cut to a party that I suppose is commemorating Damien. He's walking around with two teen girls, one on each arm, just being all Bruce Wayne, walking around like that.
Yeah, it's just like the girls' camp is coming over. Like, I don't know who these young girls are, but there's just like a cotillion party with everybody.
Right.
And then he sits down, and I don't know what those chairs are called, where they're like, there's a centerpiece, but they're all like around it.
Oh, a poof.
A poof.
That's what it's called?
Yeah.
Wow. But then, like, when he sits down, another girl sitting there is like, oh, hey.
And she like pops up over the top. Yeah. And then he is like, excuse me, ladies, I have to go. And they're like, oh.
But again, like, I don't want to get into like, where are these young girls from? Do they like cart them into the military academy party? Like, ew.
They're at the lady military, the separate woman military.
Right.
The Florence Nightingale School.
Yes, there you go. Of cotillions.
Yes. I like to imagine that the guy she was initially sitting by turns like, okay, now, as I was saying about Battlestar Galactica.
Right. Richard and Anne go to the museum, and Richard is trying to convince her that it's all finally true. They look for the daggers in the kind of office space, and then Richard delivers so intensely.
The boy has got to die.
Finally, he's committed to the bit.
Yes, it's going to happen.
Richard is digging around for the daggers and won't let him have them. She keeps guarding the desk. He's demanding them. Finally, she grabs them, whips around, stabs him in the gut.
There are your daggers. I've always belonged to him.
Now, did you see this coming? I admit, I didn't on the first watch through.
I didn't.
As she was going to end up being the Whore of Babylon because they made such a big deal out of it at the beginning. And like they kept coming back to that statue. And then, like I said, they kept cutting to her. But yeah, there was nothing in the interim. They just kind of forgot it. And she was supposed to have more of a role when it was a fighting between, like I said, the love and destiny piece. And you were also supposed to see him get more and more upset with her doting on him.
Oh, interesting.
Which doesn't happen because that's part of the thing too, is that they grow to hate the Whore of Babylon and then they burn her and devour her flesh. That doesn't happen. There's just the burning.
Right.
Because yeah, she's just seemingly out of nowhere is like, nope, I've been with him the entire time. So again, a very sort of like Saw-like ending. We're like, I guess it's you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're also in on it. And then the boiler, like I think Damien makes the boiler blow up.
That's what
because he comes to the museum and just kind of makes a face, and then she gets set on fire.
Yeah,
Damien is outside. I my heart wept for all the other artifacts that were blown up in that area too. I mean, not just all the satanic stuff, but my gosh, like old museum stuff.
Oh my gosh, me too.
Yeah.
Yes. Like, there was like an Egyptian like cartouche and there was paperwork and
again, don't put your thing right next to the boiler room, but here we are.
That's the main takeaway.
Yeah. Damien walks outside and much like the first film, our final shot is a freeze frame on Damien looking at his limo driver, I suppose, in full military outfit with his cute little cap on in the freeze frame. And that's it.
And then, and you get a Bible verse that doesn't seem like it's related to much.
Yeah.
I meant to look that up. I did not. I didn't know what the context of that was necessarily. Especially
it made it sound like that there are people pretending to be good, but they're actually with the devil. And it's like, okay, yeah, that happened, but
just the mom, I guess.
Yeah, like that didn't have the oomph to underline that at the end, but whatever.
But before we get into our final thoughts, higher body count.
Yes.
Michael Morgan, played by Ian Hendry, buried alive in ruins. Carl Bugenhagen, played by Leo McKern, buried alive in ruins. Aunt Marion, played by Sylvia Sidney, heart attack when startled by crow. Joan Hart, played by Elizabeth Shepard, eyes pecked out by crow, hit by truck. Bill Atherton, played by Lou Ayres, drowned in frozen lake. Plant worker, played by James Spinks, suffocated by toxic gas. Dr. David Passerian, played by Alan Arbus, suffocated by toxic gas. Dr. Kane, played by Meshach Taylor, cut in half by falling elevator cable. Mark Thorne, played by Lucas Donat, aneurysm caused by Damien. Dr. Charles Warren, played by Nicholas Pryor, crushed to death between two railway cars. Richard Thorne, played by William Holden, stabbed with ritual daggers by Anne. Anne Thorne, played by Lee Grant, burned to death by boiler room explosion. So I thought not a bad follow-up. We did get a little wacky, which I'm always a fan of. I could have used a little less of the corporate stuff, but I was still pretty darn entertained throughout this entire thing. I don't think I liked it as much as the first one, but I still like the really somber feeling. And man, I love that Goldstein score quite a bit.
The redo theme I like. It's a lot funkier.
Yeah.
And it seems like the devil should be solving mysteries in like a British village or something. But I think it's a lot of peaks and valleys for me. When it's big and ridiculous, I really like it, but it needs a lot more, or, lacked a lot of focus. Where the first one was all just about Damien and finding out his where he comes from and all this. And this is all just sort of like moving pieces and waiting for everything to come together. Because you can't really do a mystery again, because we know that kid's the devil, and the movie definitely doesn't pretend he's not. Mm-hmm. But it's still, there's just more interaction with Damien with stuff, or like, him deciding to be the devil, or like figuring out who he is. They either don't do it or do more with it, because that little element of it just felt very strange compared to the rest of it.
Yeah it didn't feel, like you said, like the mystery's taken out of it. So then my takeaway was, are the other ones then the same formula where people start to figure out, and then it's just like a body count, and then finally that last moment where they're like, we're going to kill him, and then they die again? Like, that's my guess for the next couple, is that's just going to be him needing to cover his butt. But we'll see, because in the third one he's come to power in theory to some extent. So does he need people to shepherd him around as much to protect him? But I have a feeling you're right, though, that's absolutely what it's going to be.
Yeah. And I was thinking about just, the title of the movie being The Omen. So, an omen is like something that is predicting, for lack of a better word. And in the first film, we had the photographs. I'm not saying I wanted photographs again because in this movie, but there was no sense of like, I just thought that added such a great sense of foreboding to this. This Omen sequel is lacking any omens. Like, where
you had the crow, and then they dropped it.
That's true.
Like halfway through.
The Crowman.
So,
But because I think, basically what it boils down to is that, like with a lot of these, the producer wanted to make more money off of this. Because David Seltzer was like, I don't want to know. I have no envisioning a sequel for any of this. I just wrote this first one and that's it. Mm-hmm. And particularly with all his rewrites or whatever, it's just like, well, let's just milk this. It's just the name. We don't need to necessarily worry about the thematic stuff as much.
But I guess for me, I did enjoy the fact that we're getting, and this will probably make more sense whether I like part 3 or not, but like, I like watching the same character kind of grow up instead of doing a different son of Satan or something like that. I like seeing the progression of one character throughout these 3 or 4 movies we're going to watch.
Yeah, this time it's Satan's nephew. Oh, look out.
Mm-hmm. But I'd say recommend it. And I had no idea what to think going into it, but I was weirdly heartened when I just noticed that it was part 2 was made in 1978, so it was still like kind of in that era of like 70s horror, and it wasn't like part 2 coming out in like 1986 and it was a slasher. Right. I like that it still feels of a piece with the first film.
Mm-hmm. Damien's on rollerblades.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there is that remake that we'll get to. So
that's true. Yeah.
We will.
Well, he'll probably be on Heelys in that one. I think that's that's soon enough.
Well, Jolene, thanks so much for joining us. Is there anything you'd like to plug? Where can people find your stuff online? I know you do a show as well.
Mm-hmm. So I have my own podcast called Hanging by a Thread. I explore horror, but then I've kind of broadened it as of recently to another films, because I just want to talk about costumes in movies. That you can find me. You can find me through my Instagram on @JoleneMarie_designs. And I'm on Twitter @JoMarieDesigns. I'm not always on Twitter. Trying to not be on Twitter. Or X now, whatever it's called. But yeah, that's where you can find me. And I will be at CryptCon in May. I'm going out there in Seattle to do some panels out there. Working on stuff right now. Can't talk about it, but it will come out in the fall. So that'll be, the rewards are there.
What kind of panels are you doing at CryptCon, or do you know yet?
So I'm going to be doing a lecture about sort of like a broader history of costume in horror movies. And then I think I'm going to do a little bit more focused one. I haven't quite decided where I landed, more in line with like some of the lectures that I do. Might be about Hitchcock, might be about that. So I haven't quite figured out my topic for that one, but the broader one is going to be about costume design and history of it in horror movies.
Nice. And John, what is your lecture going to be on at CryptCon?
Socks in horror movies. No, I have no idea. No one wants to hear me talk about anything. I am curious though, what is like, did you have any particular feelings about the fashion in this movie? I know it's not necessarily as exotic or, big costumes or anything like that, other than perhaps the red dress, but.
Yeah, no, I loved it. I think, with films like this, specifically in the horror genre too, and what I try to get people in my lectures to kind of like engage and think on is that costume design isn't just fantastical period costumes. That costume design is, people call it shopping. It's not shopping, but it is modern dress. So I love 70s fashion. I love what the whole decade was doing and the textures, because people were experimenting and men were experimenting with fashions, kind of like what we talked about with the neckerchief. So there's a lot of patterning, a lot of like tweeds and textures and houndstooths, and like men weren't afraid to match patterns. Like all of those suits in the office were just like, they were so like lovely to just see.
Yeah, there's a scene, I think it's when they're having dinner with Marion, where Warren is wearing it's like a gingham print shirt, but like a brown jacket or something like that. And I was like, oh, because I associate that a little bit more as a more recent thing. So it was kind of neat to see that.
Yeah. I mean, in fashion cycles, which is so cool. So
like it's something that I need to pay more attention to, because like I think the first time I ever really thought about it was I saw Sideways with my mom, and my mom kept pointing out how all ill-fitting Paul Giamatti's clothes were. Yeah. And how they made him look like rumpled and diminished. And totally. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so just paying attention to what that can say about character and stuff like that, rather than just being like, that's a cool shirt.
Yeah. Actually, one of the best examples of something like that is in the movie Midsommar, where you're seeing Danny standing next to her friends and Christian and all of them. And they're all wearing jeans and Danny's not, because her life is in so much of a disarray that her clothing doesn't need any structure to it either. And everybody else has kind of got a little bit together. So they're wearing more structured garments. Right. So yeah.
Cool.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Very easy, broad question, but do you have a favorite horror / costuming, like your go-to that just feels like a meal every time you watch it?
Yeah, I mean, Midsommar. I love it. And the work that Andrea Fletch did on that movie is one of my favorites, because she was able to have those elements with modern dress. She was able to take all these Scandinavian Nordic traditions and kind of amalgamate them into this haggard cult with the runes and the hand embroidery, and all of the costumes were done with like 100 yards of this old linen that she had found. So every white linen was done from one swath of fabric, which was pretty amazing. So they were uniform. And then of course the flower slug at the end, her husband's an engineer. So he constructed that specifically for Florence Pugh's body. And so it had this understructure, and it had 10,000 hand sewn silk flowers on top. And it's incredible, and it looks so simple, but it's such a feat of what she did. Yeah.
Right. Gosh. Yeah, I've only watched that once, but I when I rewatch it, I will be paying closer attention just because of that, for sure.
And I will never trust anyone in sweaters again. After, so thank you.
Don't trust people in sweaters.
I'm wearing one of my favorite sweaters right now.
I know what you're doing.
Right. Well, with that, thanks, Jolene, for coming on. All our listeners, I hope you enjoyed her. This is why we bring on smarter people than us to talk about more intense intellectual things than we do, instead of making bad jokes about splatting all the time. So I hope you learned something in addition to watching the Omen Part 2 with us. Now, next time, it's the one that I've been looking forward to. Omen Part 3, Sam Neill as Satan in the presidency. Will I be let down? Will it be, his Sam Neilliest? I'm pretty stoked to get to that one. So I
hope it goes even bigger.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for as well. Jolene, I hope you keep watching along with us, because now you've started. And
I can't stop now.
This is the mantra of this podcast. Now, you can't just watch the first one. You've got to watch the entire one and the remake. And so I hope you'll watch along with us, just like everybody else out there. I know a couple of people have already jumped into the Omen Part 2, so that always heartens me. So in the meantime, you can find us at This May Hurt a Bit Pod on Instagram, Hurt a Bit Pod on YouTube, and you can email us at thismayhurtabitpod@gmail.com. So with that, we'll see you next week for the Omen Part 3. Good night.
Good night.
This has been a Caretaker Press production. It was produced by James Strayer and edited by John C. Myers. Logo by Ethan Kimberling, and music by Michael Arthur Holloway, who you can find on Bandcamp. Follow us on Instagram at thismayhurtabitpod, and email us at thismayhurtabitpod@gmail.com. Give us a 5-star review over on your favorite podcast app, and we'll see you next time.